So, the title of my talk today is Memes Matter. How many know what that means? Yeah, a few. If you were around about a year and a half ago when I did the series on the colors in the Bible, you would remember that a meme is the word given to this cultural view in the spiral dynamics model. For those who this might be a new concept to them, let me just give you a brief overview. So people think in different ways, yes? Yes. Family members, coworkers, friends, neighbors, even your spiritual community, individuals in there might have very different worldviews. They might have different values, some that overlap, some that might be unique. We certainly have different countries sharing this planet that seemed to have totally different worldviews from our worldview here in the West. And their worldviews affect, as all worldviews affect, not just our own spiritual lives, but our policies and values and interests and the whole gamut of life and the culture of life. Spiral dynamics was introduced by Dr. Clare Graves in the 1960s as a way to try and look at this from the long view of humankind, and later popularized by Dr. Don Beck and Christopher Cohen. And it just offers a framework, a broad, we're very complex, but this is a broad way to just understand our own cultural evolution through the history of humankind. And it uses a color system to help sort of identify these different stages. There's no real rhyme or reason other than somebody decided that this was the way the colors were going to look. And it gives us a way in which we can perhaps communicate about them a little better. So when we take a look at the spiral, the beige at the very bottom is our initial human beginning, around 250,000 years ago, where survival was the primary focus and value. It makes sense, right? Just getting through each day without getting eaten or killed by a neighbor, was a good day. So their focus was on food and shelter and warmth and reproduction. And out of that arose this need for better protection. They discovered, boy, if we band together, our chances of survival are better. So purple rose around 50,000 years ago, where tribes were formed, where rituals were used to try and keep whatever bad juju was happening at bay or make it go away, keep the spirits happy, and ensure the safety of the group. But it also asked people to sacrifice self for the group, for the good of the tribe, including literally sometimes sacrificing your own life. You were the one who was going to get thrown over the cliff or down into the volcano to appease the gods. And so out of that arose the red phase, which is the development of a very strong individual ego. It's kind of where the individual ego came to bring in that sense of power for the individual. It started about 10,000 years ago, they estimate, and the focus was all around self and power and glory and self-expression without guilt or remorse. It was about achievement rather than about how things got achieved. That was a very difficult and violent time. And again, we were back to that place with survival. You didn't know if there was going to be a warring, group of people that came in, it might be your last day on earth. So again, to bring a greater sense of safety and survival, blue rises up around 5,000 years ago, and it's concerned with order, with purpose, with discipline, with tradition, with rules. That's the law came into being around this time. And it was all there to try and, again, bring a greater opportunity for survival to all people. It was about the group. It was about the community. You self-sacrificed for the whole. And as in all things, there was some pushback from that. And out of this, in alignment with the scientific revolution and all these new understandings of life arising, orange developed about 300 years ago. It's what founded this particular country, was that orange value of reason and of science, the focus on mastering our environment for our own self-interest, for our own comfort, for our own success, became the real focus and the real values that were part of that culture. And then around 150 years ago, we began to evolve what they call the green phase. We saw a shift in valuing caring over rationality, in a call for equality and sharing of resources, and this need to try and desire to support the whole rather than the individual. Many called the orange phase the phase of consumerism, and eventually as people consumed enough, they found that they were still empty. There was more that they wanted out of life, which then began to show up in this green phase. And then emerging over these last 50 years is a whole new tier, this tier 2 that we see up here. The first level is yellow, and it is all about being nonlinear and flexible, and to be able to move in the flow of life and recognize and experience the interconnectedness of life, to rely upon the wisdom of the heart rather than just solely the ideas of the mind. It's like it becomes a kaleidoscope of hierarchies and systems and forms that all sort of flow into each other, but there's not the same level of structure about them. And out of that even is this tier 2, and this is just the imaginings of what we see happening. There's very little of the population that's living in this new second tier, so it's more about what we believe and what we see just at those early emergences, which is, again, back to the community. You'll notice that each one of these, it goes back and forth between the individual and a group, and the individual and a group, and that kind of is how oftentimes we individually evolve. We focus on self, and then we want to be engaged in that, in the outer, and then we may come back and forth. So right now, best estimates are that, and I'm going to talk about in the West because it's different in different parts of the world, but in the West, 30 to 40% of the population is largely in the blue meme. Perhaps even lower than that, or the blue and lower. Let's go with that. Blue, we might have some red and some purple still hanging around. And then 40 to 50% is at the orange meme, is at that orange level of values, and 20 to 25% has a green worldview. Less than 2% are up there in that upper tiers. This is, again, a very broad picture, and when it comes to individuals or even communities, we are likely multicolored. We're not likely all one thing. In fact, depending upon our own individual value system, we might at some levels be blue, like we're blue when it comes to our family and our authority and our discipline and rules, and orange when it comes to our own self-mastery and interest in the way we achieve success, and green environmentally, and perhaps yellow in our spirituality. We are not just one-dimensioned, we are multi-dimensional, multi-valued beings. I have been reading several books in preparation for my next semester. So this is my wrap-up of what I discovered in my first semester of integral, mission-centric communities and how we evolve into that. And I started reading this book, and it inspired my question today. The book is called The Emerging Church by Bruce Sanguin, and it uses this spiral to look at a lot of different aspects. And the one chapter that really piqued my interest asked this question: what color is your Christ? If we're laying over these different value systems, we will all probably at some different aspects see Christ differently. We start from the blue lens, which is the primarily worldview of Christianity, although that's shifting and changing with time, but that's been the worldview. The Christian church was formed in the blue meme. Although you can see some aspects of purple that they brought along into it, and red, the warrior elements, especially in its early years. There was the Crusades and all those kinds of things was a very red energy that they were working with. The traditional Christ we would describe as the one and only Son of God, who suffered and died for our sins, modeling sacrifice of self as part of the journey of a good Christian for some future reward. He is the only truth and the only way and the only life, and if you don't believe, you're going to hell. That was the traditional, and is the traditional lens of the Christ. Through the modern, rational, individualistic orange lens, Christ is the example of extraordinary human potential. These things you can do, and even greater things can you do. Those who apply my teachings will achieve success. The Bible, rather than the literal word of God, becomes rich metaphors and teaching stories rather than a specific set of rules and guidelines to follow. Some call the orange Christ the prosperity Christ, because this is the Christ where you can look at as your model of how to be CEO of your own life. In the green, egalitarian, boy, the mouth does not want to work this morning, Christ, as that has a written, this particular lens and understanding of the Christ is, my teachings are among many paths to the one God. I'm an example of universal love and compassion and equality. The Christ of the green value system widens the net to include everybody. All of those who perhaps had been outcast before are now brought in to the family. It is the Christ of all of us. Not just my nation, not just my tribe, not just my religion or my family. It is the Christ that encompasses all. I've been recently seeing these commercials, and I actually went out and looked at their website because they were intriguing. I don't know if you've seen them. They're called He Gets Us. This is an example of a really green Christ. And Nick, we got like a 30-second video. Maybe.
A caring man took a walk. Everywhere he looked, people suffered. Anxiety ran high, hope dwindled, hatred rose. His neighbors had lost trust in the system and in each other. I need to do something, he thought. I'll bring them together and feed them. Around the dinner table, they can talk and see how much they have in common. Shared struggles, shared joy, shared pain. So he prepared a feast and invited all into his home. But some refused to sit at his table because they chose to only see differences. He was heartbroken because he wanted everyone to eat and be filled, not with food and wine, but with compassion.
You can go look at the website. Interestingly enough, they don't really self-identify other than a group of people with a desire to see Christ as one who welcomes all, who gets all, who is a part and a support of all. This yellow turquoise second tier Christ, what was that? What does that Christ look like? It encompasses all of the universe. It's no longer even limited to this earth. It's all cultures, all value systems. And I know this seems like, how can you do that? All value systems get integrated. The very best of every one of these first tier levels is brought into being so that rituals still have, and mysticism still has a place in our life. Power, individual power, still has a place in our life, so that rules and guidelines can help us navigate the complexities at times in our life, so that we know that we are empowered to, within us, we have all these powers that we can do whatever it is that we're called to do, and that as we bring ourselves up into that greater and greater experience of success, we can then use it to embrace and to uplift the communities around us. It knows this hidden wholeness that binds us all together. It can see that even in the midst of really what might appear to us significant differences. It's non-coercive. It's lovingly a hand extended to create space so that everyone has the freedom to evolve and embrace and to live from the place they are right now. Life can embrace paradoxes. Life, and you've heard this from me before, becomes both and, not either or. In our humanness, our tendency is just, we live in this, it's either right or it's wrong. There's not a whole lot of gray. This Christ can say, yes, that can all be true at the same time, and yet there's still this wholeness that exists in the middle of that. So as we move into our time of meditation today, I'm just going to invite you, as we turn our attention inward, to just see where you are in your lens. How does Christ live in you? And it might be multicolored. It may not be one thing, but just to connect with that Christ and see what's alive and what it's seeking to express in and through you. So I just invite you to perhaps close your eyes to help block out all of the external stimuli, or just focus on a point in the room. And take a deep breath. And as you let that breath go, just feel all of you come into this now moment. Your mind, your heart, your spirit, all fully present in this time and in this space. And as you just continue to breathe naturally, imagine that thinking part of you is now moving slowly down and coming to a gentle rest in your heart region, so that you are truly connecting with, tapping into, activating, bathing your entire being in the wisdom of the heart. And then just allow yourself to open the space for greater understanding, greater illumination of the Christ that lives in you right now. Invite that presence to be front and center in this moment, and to share with you in whatever way that unfolds a vision of its true nature. And then just take a moment to be open to what is seeking to arise in a greater way within you. What value of that Christ life in you is seeking to expand? And as you take another deep breath in, just stay open to how this might unfold for you in the coming days and weeks and months, as you just every now and then check in, using this broad yet easy way of just taking a pulse for where you are in this moment. And as you begin to bring your attention back to this time and to this place, taking another breath in, and in that breath, being aware once again of your body and the chair supporting it. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. So as I shared a little bit earlier, each level of this spiral dynamic model arose out of imbalances that were in the previous. There's amazing things that happen in each one, and somehow at times they can seem to get out of balance. The purple, while it created safety for everyone, as I was alluding to, it also didn't allow any individualistic input rights. They couldn't have a say in what was going on, and even, as I alluded to, be asked to sacrifice for the whole. So it gave rise to this individual power of red, and this is the energy that the victor is the one who gets all the spoils. It's just pure physical power and domination. But the shadow, and just like we talked about last week, there's shadows that sometimes develop underneath it, devalues human life. Success is far more important than the method in which you get there. And eventually, we had to move beyond that, or we were going to just destroy ourselves. Humanity was just going to wipe each other out. There would only be a few left, and even then, they may not survive. So that gives rise to this blue, this law and order, this way in which we can more safely be together. And out of that, there arose this challenge that what had developed was rigid and strict and uncaring, and it didn't have the wisdom of the heart as a part of it. It was inflexible. And again, there became this need. We saw this happening in our own history of the last couple hundred years, where out of that rigid church system that had developed in Europe, individuals wanted the freedom to be able to connect with God how they wanted to connect with God from a religious perspective. They wanted to be able to determine their own trajectory in life. They wanted to not just be regulated. If you were born a farmer, all your kids will be farmers. The chase system, that they wanted to have individual say and power. And if you had the desire and you put the time and effort in, that you could achieve whatever you wanted to achieve. And yet, as we've seen in our history, that out of that orange determination, again, sort of at all costs, that there created this shadow side where it had this ability to exercise its dominion over those who had less power. We saw things like child labor and all sorts of things that were necessary in order for the success of the business, and that was even more important. And the same with the earth. The earth was just here to serve me. And out of that arose the green that we're just been experiencing in the last 150 years, where people say, no, but we also have to, take care of the community and have flexibility and use our resources wisely and maintain harmony. So I just wanted you to see this from a different perspective here, because one of the challenges I think that we're facing right now, and one of the reasons why we see ourselves in a fair amount of conflict, is the increased speed in which these memes seem to be developing. If you look at the bottom, so 250,000 years ago, in the beginnings of our human development, it took about 200,000 years to get to that purple level. Took a long time before they figured out, hey, let's band together. We can be safer. From there, we're looking at just 40,000 years for the red value system to arise, and then 5,000, and then 4,700 years to get to orange. But now look at how quickly things are happening. It seems kind of like a long time when we're just measuring years in our life, but when you look at the whole trajectory of human development, everything's happening really quickly. I mean, we're moving now to less than 100 years or 150 years between orange and green, and then this yellow and turquoise that's now seeking to emerge in a small way started 50 and 30 years ago. So there's a lot of change and growth, and I think sometimes we as human beings don't always, especially if we're blue. Blue's like, this is the way it is, and we're not going to be shifting for nothing. It's interesting when you kind of lay this lens. You can do this over all sorts of aspects of life, but when I laid it over unity, I had this observation, because unity's in its we're not quite 150 yet, but in its 100+ years of being in existence, there's always been this tension and pull. Are we Christian? Are we not Christian? Who are we as a movement? Where traditional churches have a very clear vision of that. Unity's shifted and changed over time. But what I realized is that unity embraced this turquoise Christ, this yellow turquoise oneness Christ from the very beginning. But it was dropped into a blue organizational structure, which is what a top-down, you got the top dog, and then you've got those who serve underneath that, with an orange practice, because especially in Unity's early years, it was all about empowering people to know that they are co-creators and they can do all things with that Christ alive with them. And then over the last probably 3, 4, 5 decades, we've started to see how green has wanted to be immersed in the unity communities. And it's caused, each time we've sort of made some shifts and changes, us to question, who are we? What are we here to do and to be and to express into the world? To be determined, I think, is where we're at right now. So the leap to this second tier both culturally in our lives and in spiritual communities, requires us to successfully integrate all the previous levels. This is what the Christ had successfully integrated all of these different aspects of who we are with you cherry pick the best things out of them and you let the rest go. To transcend, but include those positive aspects in each. And it's not an easy task when our default typical human reaction to the other levels is a rejection. That's how we tend to be. That's our dualistic. Oh, that was bad. Red power is bad. Blue law is good. Orange, those corporate, bloodsuckers are bad. Green is. So part of our journey is to recognize that there's value that we want to take from all of them. That's the only way we're going to get to this integrated whole. I believe that this is our next spiritual evolution, to embrace the very best that each level has as we integrate the whole demonstrated by the Christ. I picked a green song. Well, it is our opportunity now to share of our financial good with this community. We are so grateful for the many channels in which we receive our good, grateful for each of you who are certainly a part of that. In just a moment, the ushers are going to invite you to come up row by row, and we would ask that you would place your gift in the large basket and then take an affirmation to bless you this week from the smaller basket. And even if you give electronically, which many people do, or this is not your Sunday to share, you can just still come. You can use one of the little cards that are in the pew pockets, or simply just place your hand over the basket. Add your energy to it. See that prosperity flowing in and through your life and the life of Center of Unity. So let us take these gifts, or the energy of them, into our hands and into our hearts and bless them together. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Father, Mother, God.
All right, so why don't we all stand up together and join hands? Let's do our peace.
Into this day, into this week, embracing all of the colors that we are. We go knowing our prayer for protection. Together, the light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Walk.